Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Dr. John Etherington, who is a consultant in rheumatology and rehabilitation medicine, and also the medical director at Pure Sports Medicine. John, how are you doing?
I'm very well, Andy. You well?
I'm doing well, thank you. No, I'm looking forward to having a chat with you. I enjoyed coming to see you at the facility in Moorgate last week, and you've been someone I've been trying to get on here for a while. Or wanted to get on here. So hope you don't feel the pressure by that.
I'll try not to be overwhelmed. Yeah.
You certainly don't look overwhelmed. So yeah, that's always good. There's a lot to unpick there, and I could have put a lot more in when I was introducing you, but I'm looking forward to going through that. But whereabouts are you from originally, John?
I'm from Leeds, so the opposite side of the Pennines to you, I think. But yeah, born and bred in Leeds, from brought up by a Geordie family, so sort of slightly different background. But yeah, so I left Leeds to go to university in Birmingham when I was 19. Yeah.
Right. So what was it like growing up in Leeds? And I didn't know you from Leeds.
It was good. I like Leeds. It was pretty robust in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up there. Not quite the sophisticated city that it is now, but yeah, I like Leeds. But as I say, pretty straightforward, robust, northern background. But yeah, it was good fun. I enjoyed it.
So were you in? I'm not sure football's your main sport that you're interested in, but because Leeds were obviously a massive team back then. So how big was that in the culture and upbringing?
Oh, it was a big thing actually. I'm not a great football fan, but I still keep an eye out on Leeds, and I do watch football. But as a kid growing up, my dad used to take me to Leeds United, and I used to watch them regularly. And obviously was as everybody was in Leeds, a big fan at the time. And Leeds at that stage were as big as Manchester City are now. It was a big club, and yeah, I enjoyed it. My brother was my father and brother were very good footballers, and both had sort of were trialists for professional teams. My dad at Newcastle and my brother at Leeds. But he didn't get his contract at Leeds, which was a bit of a disappointment. But yeah, no, so very much brought up in that sort of sporting background. My dad was a very keen sportsman.
Right, yeah, no, it's always interesting. Like, there's been a lot of biographies and talk about the Damned United and talking about Brian Clough, Don Revie, those sort of things. So it's before my time, but my dad still talks about that era very fondly. And football's definitely changed a lot since then.
It's changed hugely, and I'm old enough to remember that time, and it was very vivid and very passionate, and very old school, really. But yeah, Don Revie was looked upon like a god, and when Brian Clough came in, I can remember even as a kid thinking this isn't going to last very long. So it was really, and that film and that book, I read the book as well, are absolutely excellent. They really capture that period of time in the 70s, but also in football, complete different world to the stars of today and the money of today.
Yeah, no, definitely is. And then, so in terms of you, then, before moving to Birmingham, what prompted that desire or aim to move into medicine?
To be absolutely honest, I can't really remember. Although I do remember reading a very old book called Doctor in the House, and it was written in the 50s about being a medical student in the 50s by a doctor. And most people won't know it now, but it was on the shelf at home, and I read it, and it seemed like fun. And it wasn't actually too dissimilar to what actually happened when I got to medical school. So yeah, maybe that book was one of the things. I think the bottom line was I was very interested in science and biological sciences, but I didn't want to spend my life in the laboratory. And I knew that any science or biological science which had involvement with human beings and having to deal with human interaction would always be interesting. And so I got to a point where I knew that I wanted to do medicine. I can't say I particularly knew why, but I did want to do medicine, and I was going to do it whatever happened. And I did. So I think that I heard some very good advice once from a musician. The musician was asked how to get into music, and she said, well, if you can think of anything at all you would prefer to do rather than music, then do it, because it is just so tough. So you've got to be able to say at any stage in your life, this is what I want to do, and there's nothing I'd rather do. And I think I certainly have felt that way when I was trying to get into medicine, and felt that way all the way through. This is what I want to do. This is what I am designed to do, if you wish. It might
That's
not do
great.
very well, but it was a passion.
Yeah, no, that's great, isn't it? If you can end up having a full career in doing something that you love doing, that's the dream, really.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, how did you end up in Birmingham?
I applied and they took me. I mean, as with most people applying for medicine, you don't get much of a choice. Although I do recall very much going for the interview there, and it was a tough interview, and I already had my A-level results, so they knew what I didn't have to go away and get the A-levels. And they offered me a place at the time, and I thought, well, they literally asked me to leave the room and then come back in and offer me a place, and that was great. And an offer from Leicester as well. But I do recall walking through the streets of Birmingham and listening to the Brummies chat away, and I thought, well, with an accent like that, you can never be truly unhappy in a place. So I thought I like Birmingham, I like the Brummies, and stayed. And I was once again, I was right. It was a great place to be a student. Great medical training, quite tough, but and the Brummies were brilliant, great people to help and treat.
Yeah, was Broad Street still the place to go out then?
Yeah, and around that sort of area, and some of the cheaper places, obviously, as a student, and the sort of Sally Oak and all that sort of area.
Yeah. And then, so when you were at university, then did you have a plan of the kind of area of medicine that you did want to go into?
Not at all. I'm proud to say I don't think I've ever had a plan, and I'd always been keen on the military at school, and I'd been a cadet at school, and I knew I'd quite liked to have a military career of some sort. So whilst at medical school, I joined the OTC, which is Officer Training Corps, which is a sort of branch of the reserve forces, and did that for a couple of years in my spare time, the first 2 years of the university. So that was very sort of basic army infantry training, and at the end of that 2 years, I applied for what was called a cadetship, which basically meant that the army would pay you a small amount of money for the next 3 years at medical school, and at the end of that, you committed to serving with them for 5 years after you finish your house jobs. So enjoyed the OTC, but again, that was some of these OTCs are quite social and quite sort of fun and relaxed. Ours wasn't. It was lots of running up hills with kit on your back and digging holes. But I thought it was a very good introduction to the army, and I enjoyed it, and got a lot out of it, and therefore sort of committed to signing up on the cadetship, which my wife subsequently tells me was attractive to her because I was on pop star wages. But in retrospect, I think my first year I got £3,500. So, and then at that stage, that was even taxable. So I worked out, having signed up for 5 years in the army, I just got a salary which was pretty much equivalent to what I was getting in those days as a student grant. So yeah, I haven't looked into the paperwork in that much detail, obviously. But anyway, I joined up and did my rest of my medical school training at Birmingham. Did a year as a houseman in Birmingham, and then joined the army proper.
So when you joined the army then, so you mentioned about having to get involved and doing like the physical aspects. So how much of that do you need to do alongside everything else that you're doing?
Yeah, you have to do you have to do you have to do your basic requirements and stay fit, and it depends what unit you're with, really. So if you're working in a hospital 80 hours a week, you're not doing much physical training. If as I was a battalion medical officer, what was called then a regimental medical officer, then you're doing almost, not quite the same training as the guys in the rest of the battalion. So you're doing physical training in the morning, then you do your medical clinic, and then you might do some more training in the afternoon, or play sport, or play for the battalion football team or the rugby team or the cricket team or whatever, and then squeeze your medicine around the rest of it. So as I say, it depends what sort of unit or regiment you're attached to at the time, but you have to remain fit, and there's certain basic standards of fitness that everybody has to pass.
And then, so what was life like then, having all that going on? Sounds pretty good to me in terms of being able to play sport all the time.
Yeah, well, it was actually. My first job was as a battalion medical officer to an infantry battalion, and bear in mind that was 35 more years ago. I went out for lunch with some of the young officers. They're not so young now, that I met at the time. I was out for lunch with them last week. So you develop very close bonds and relationships, and we were in Northern Ireland at the time, so that adds to the sort of operational threat and the importance of what you're doing. But once you've done the medical side of things, there was huge opportunity to play sport. It might be just taking your soldiers out to play five-side football in the afternoon, or it might be going for a run, or there might be a battalion rugby match on or something like that. So yeah, it was a hugely different experience of medicine, where you had to be obviously delivering medical care, but I had a 10-man section of medics, and these medics were predominantly infantry soldiers who'd done some medics sort of basic paramedical training, and I had to manage those 10 men, and and respond and report to my company commander and the battalion commander about the various medical and health issues in the battalion. And I suppose at 25, 26-year-old, having command of 10 sort of fairly robust infantry soldiers as a doctor is a bit of a challenge, but those challenges are what help you develop as an individual and hopefully as a leader in the future. Because as you've got an infantry battalion where the average age is 25. Most of the people are younger than you. And there's a few people older than you who are, maybe late 30s, early 40s. So you're sort of middle-aged, if you wish, in that battalion at 26. And you're trying to get soldiers operationally fit and robust enough to patrol rural and street locations in Northern Ireland and know what to do if there was an incident. So you're involved in leading your men, but also training the battalion in medical care and advising on public health and other issues. And it's a bit like being a team doctor to a professional team, but obviously the organisation is bigger. looking after about 650 soldiers, and you're, the risks are greater, put it that way. So, but as an experience, it was brilliant. Enjoyed it. Having said that, after about 2 years of doing it, you're aching to do a bit more complex medicine, and it was a good time to move on. But the experience was brilliant.
So yeah, so being in Northern Ireland, like how under threat did you feel at that point?
I mean, there wasn't bullets flying everywhere by any stretch of the imagination, but the threat was there, present all the time. So the threat would be there if you're going. We were based in a relatively safe area, but having said that, about a month after I left, the area was mortared. But if you went shopping, you're looking over your shoulder all the time, or checking your car for undercar booby traps, or if you're going down to the border location, you'd be doing so in unmarked vehicles carrying weapons. So yeah, there was a threat there pretty much all the time at that particular time.
So what did you move on to after that?
Then I started training in what's now called core medical training, so general professional training as a hospital physician. So I went back to Woolwich, where there was a military hospital at that stage, and did that training and passed my membership exams, membership at the Royal College of Physicians, and then had to decide what to specialise in. And I was a bit split really, because I've enjoyed most of the subjects I've done over the years, and therefore I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do gastroenterology or cardiology or neurology or something like that. And I had 6 months to finish my general professional training, and I was suggested that I work. Sorry, suggested I work on the rheumatology and rehabilitation ward, which a subsequent mentor of mine, Robin Garnett, was running at the time. And he said, "Yep, come and work there." And I thought, well, it'd be interesting. I have no particular enthusiasm for the subject, but it'd be interesting to see what rheumatology is like. And in reality, after 6 months, I really enjoyed it, and I'd enjoyed the rheumatology, but I've also, interestingly, quite to my surprise, enjoyed the rehabilitation medicine, which was mainly traumatic brain injury. So people with mainly soldiers with severe traumatic brain injury as a result of usually road traffic collisions or assault or something like that. And it sounds a bit obvious now, but the interesting thing about rehabilitation medicine is that, unlike most other bits of medicine, what you're doing is taking somebody from a very low level and taking them to a much better level. And in a lot of general medicine, like heart disease, whatever, all you're doing is, to some extent, managing a decline, because inevitably we all get worse. So the thing about rehabilitation medicine is you make people better. And that came as a bit of a sort of eye-opener. And I enjoyed it, and then applied for and got onto the training program to specialise in rheumatology and rehab.
And where was that based at?
That was again the military hospital in Woolwich. It was also at St Thomas's Hospital in London. I did time at the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital at Stanmore, and at the same time I did a master's at the London Hospital in sports medicine. So in the military at that time, rheumatology and rehab covered the gap, which was musculoskeletal medicine, which is largely now covered by sport and exercise medicine. So in order to be competent at seeing soldiers with arthritis or an ACL injury or a shoulder injury or severe traumatic brain injury or spinal cord injury, you needed a mixture of skills. And that was broadly covered by rheumatology, rehabilitation medicine, and additional training in sports medicine. And that's what I did, at the end of which I became a consultant.
And so how was that quite a new qualification then, the Masters at that point?
Relatively new. It wasn't the first cohort going through, but it hadn't. I think it may have been going for about 5 or 6 years by the time I'd done it. But I'm not sure that there were many other or any other masters at that stage in England or UK. So it was relatively new.
And then in terms of doing that, then what did you foresee the benefit of doing that within the military role that you were doing?
Well, sports medicine.
Mm.
And because soldiers present with musculoskeletal injuries all the time, and my job was still in the military, and I was still interested in continuing that job in the military. And the presentations which I saw then, and which I still see now, are a lot of people presenting with musculoskeletal injuries, knee pain or back pain, many of which are due to overuse or a specific injury. But a lot, and certainly a lot of the patients I see now are patients with inflammatory joint disease, which is presented as a musculoskeletal injury. So there's a big overlap. And I certainly found, as a rheumatologist, knowing more sports and musculoskeletal medicine helped me. And I'm certain that seeing musculoskeletal injuries it's a lot easier if you know some rheumatology as well. And on top of that, then understanding the rehabilitation process is exactly the same, and applying it is exactly the same as if you've got someone with a sprained ankle, as if you've got someone with multiple combat injuries. The principles are exactly the same. It's just the severity and the goals which are different. So for me, having that mixture of rheumatology, rehabilitation, sport and exercise medicine all melded together, I think helps. It helps me.
Yeah, and then at this point, then, so were there other opportunities, or I'm sure there were, but other opportunities coming to you that you thought might be of interest to leave the military for?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about the military is that you get imbued in it and you love it. Well, I did, but you can be. You always like to think the grass is greener, and yeah, I could have left and gone to the NHS and thought about that a number of times, really. But on balance, I enjoyed what I was doing. I enjoyed the patients. I enjoyed working with the teams. There's a military ethos which you have. Yeah, so there were later on there were opportunities around professional sport and things like that. But for a variety of reasons, I stayed where I was.
At what stage did you start getting involved in the more management, strategic? Like you've been involved in a number of different things at a high level, working with whether it's politicians or government. How did that transition come about?
Again, accidentally, I had no particular interest in management, leadership, or committees, and in fact, I sort of looked upon them with a bit of scorn. I thought that was for other people. But after a consultant job working in Gosport, at the military hospital there, I then moved to Headley Court and worked as a clinician there for a couple of years, doing a variety of things, neuro rehabilitation. I led the team there, and then doing other types of musculoskeletal rehabilitation. And it gradually, as you become a little bit older and the other people, disappear, there are administrative or leadership jobs to do within the environment that you're working. So at Headley, I was there head of the medical division, which was basically a medical director controlling the doctors, and then I became what was called then the clinical director, which was managing the entire allied health professional group, which is about 100 people at the time. So you sort of work through these jobs and balancing that with your clinical work as well. And then I became then they created this job, clinical director. So the previous job was OC rehab day, but the clinical director then became the operational lead for all clinical activities in Headley Court, which was getting busier and busier and busier. And there were about 350 staff, and about 200 of those are clinical, and the outputs became more and more important. And so I was the clinical director for that. And then on top of that, came the invasions of Iraq in 2003, and then Afghanistan. Well, the operational tempo in Afghanistan increased around 2006. And so at that stage, then we were starting to get back, initially small numbers, but then increasing numbers, the battle casualties from Iraq and Afghanistan. And this required a complete shift of how we've been working. So we'd worked on a sort of relatively slow stream type of neuro rehabilitation, lots of turnover for musculoskeletal rehabilitation services, but now we were getting in casualties which were unprecedented in their severity, because battlefield first aid and field surgery had improved so effectively that people who would have died even 10 years earlier were surviving with really catastrophic injuries. And the complexity of injury was getting worse, but also the numbers were getting bigger. And as we were fighting wars in Iraq and Afghanistan simultaneously, that meant that there were more patients coming into Birmingham, which was the receiving hospital in the UK. And then we needed to develop a plan to receive those casualties into Headley Court, and keep doing it for what turned out to be the next 10 years on a initially an exponentially growing number of patient activities to then a steady state of patients for the best part of about 5 to 6 years. So I was the person at the time that had to design that process and grow the numbers of staff that we had to deal with these cases, and also train up and be capable of delivering the rehabilitation services that were required for these injured individuals. So from being a relatively, well, it was a busy job, but being from a busy job but in a constrained environment, we then went into an environment where everything changed almost overnight, with a huge demand on our staff and resources, and to grow an operational response in keeping with the demand. So to put it in context, we started this thing called complex trauma. And when we started it, I was the only consultant. I didn't have any allocated full-time staff to do it, but we had 4 beds. And that was in about 2006. By 2014, we had 100 staff purely for these patients. We had 4 consultant teams, and we had 75 inpatient beds for complex trauma patients alone, and another 25 beds for brain injury. Plus, we were still doing our musculoskeletal rehabilitation services. So we were putting through nearly just under 3,000 patients a year through Headley Court, and we developed most of that in the first 4 years.
Wow, that's incredible. And then in terms of actually getting that significant investment into things, so how does that happen?
Well, depends who you speak to, but my recollection of it is that one had to develop what the system looked like. What does a multidisciplinary team look like? How do they communicate with each other? And how many people do we need to treat the patients that are coming through? And then to realise that we're getting many more patients coming through. And we had a requirement that patients should not stay in Birmingham Hospital any longer than they needed. And that was a demand placed on us, firstly by the hospital trust, secondly by defence, in the sense that they didn't want people languishing around and getting bad press, and thirdly by the various secretaries of state for health and defence. In other words, it wouldn't look politically good if we weren't delivering the healthcare that these people needed. So there was a constant stream of people coming in. We spent most of our time trying to develop the model. What did it look like? How do we do it? And then you get to a point where you need more beds, and you need more staff, and you need more equipment, and you need more space. And that's where I suppose, from my perspective, that's where the demands suddenly came onto me as the clinical director. There was a commanding officer of the unit who was administered the unit and made sure that it all worked. But as a clinical director, I was in charge of the operational outputs. So by accident, then I'm having meetings with, well, 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star officers, meetings with junior ministers of state, secretary of state for defence, secretary of state for health. I even had to brief 2 prime ministers about what we were doing at a relatively low rank in the scheme of things, because what became clear during Iraq and Afghanistan was that the main corporate knowledge was held at a relatively low rank in the medical services, because we were the active clinicians and so knew the ins and outs of everything. And so therefore, if I said, well, we needed a new prosthetic limb, which costs £13,000 per limb, and we need it because A, it's good, and B, the Americans are using it, and do you want the Americans to have better equipment than the Brits? Then we would have to put a business case together, and we would have to present this to the Secretary of State for Defence and say, well, we need another 3 million a year to do this. And then the argument is, well, can we afford it? What are the benefits of this? Can you measure the difference between X limb and Y limb? Is it make, the actual price, does it make that much difference? What are the presentational issues? And that might be for prosthetic limbs, that might be for extra beds. If you need extra beds, you need an extra building. How are we going to pay for that building? Who wants to pay for that building? Do you really need that building? Are you sure you really need that building? And dealing with that, dealing with the pressures of the public profile of it. So some of that public profile comes onto you. So if a patient has a complaint, you're in the sun. Relative has a complaint, you're in the sun. And that's bad enough. But the main problem is, if patient's relative complaints, Secretary of State for Defence is in the sun, and if he's feeling under pressure, then I guarantee everybody below them is feeling under pressure, and that eventually trickles down to you. And so an immense pressure to make sure that politicians' lives are happier than they could be, and at the same time, you're dealing with really, really complicated patients. So for most of that time, I was working as a clinician on the complex trauma team, and you're dealing with people that lost 3 limbs or partial, literally lost half their brain, or they've got massive musculoskeletal injuries, multiple fractures, nerve injuries, all as a result of usually blast injury. So you're dealing with the shop floor side of things where people are really sick, and then you're dealing with the politics of it in the background. And that, you know, it's a long answer to how I ended up doing more and more on the administrative side and the leadership side.
Mm. And how did you find doing that, moving into that sort of work? I know you're doing your clinical as well, but did you enjoy that leadership, management, I guess, politicking, you know, whatever you want, lobbying, whatever you want to call it?
I don't know if I enjoyed it because it was pretty hard work and pretty stressful, because you're constantly trying to justify what you're doing or what you need. And in those sorts of environments, people will then turn around and say, "Oh, you're just sort of, you know, grandstanding, or you're just, you know, being emotional, or you're making too much of these issues or whatever." So you're constantly under criticism. What I found was, I don't want to be big-headed, but I thought I was quite good at it. I was quite good at understanding the other people's motivations and how to get around them. And I did feel very passionate about the fact that actually what we were doing was good. We were doing a good thing for the good people who had been catastrophically injured, and my job was to get them the best that they could. And it didn't always work out, but more often than not it did. And I think one of the things about leadership that probably isn't talked a lot about is that I think really good leaders are altruistic. They will sacrifice bits of themselves for the greater good of the organization or the mission. But that altruism brings with it, you know, a lot of hard work and stress and commitment. And if you haven't got that, then ultimately your patients suffer.
Have you got any examples around that altruism in that sort of context then?
Well, maybe altruism. I wouldn't want to give an example of my altruism because I'm not sure I'm particularly altruistic, but I think you've got to make some sacrifices yourself if you really believe in what you're trying to do. You know, it's very easy to lack moral courage in those situations. It's much easier to do what the boss wants you to do. But if the boss is wrong, then you've got to tell him, if it's for the benefit of your patients or the operation or whatever. Now, that doesn't make you popular, and that may ultimately hold you back in your career or whatever. But it's what you get paid to do. You're getting paid to tell truth to power. And I think lots of people don't do that. But your job is to do that. That's what you get. You know, they're not paying you for being nice. They're paying you to tell them the truth. And I think that that, you know, you need to sacrifice something of your you know, career aspirations if you want to do this properly, because after all, the guy you're trying to do it for has just sacrificed 3 limbs for his country. So what, you know, maybe you won't make 1 star, but who's made the biggest sacrifice? So your job is to make sure that everybody else gets what they need.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then we were talking a bit earlier on about sort of culture and like what really drives a good organization? Like what was the culture like when you were building this? Because you were seeing some horrific things, but you were also building a team to help that.
I think the culture in the team ultimately was great. It was a mixture of military and civilian, predominantly civilian. And of course, what people forget is that crisis, or that period of stress, was over 10 years. And some of the senior doctors, like myself, were involved for that for 10 years. But most of the people that ended up being involved with it for most of that time were civilian staff who were the experts in prosthetic rehabilitation, for example, or particular types of brain injury rehabilitation. I think in some ways it's easy in a crisis, be it COVID or Iraq and Afghanistan, because we all have a single focus. We know what the job is, we know what the demand is, and we know what we need to do. The stress in those environments comes when you know what you need to do and haven't got the resources to do it, or the training, or the capacity. So my job was to get the training, capacity, and the resources to do it. If you can do that, and you're doing your very best as a clinician, then people are content. Now, I won't describe the types of injuries we saw, but they were horrific. But we were still coming back to that thing when I first started rehabilitation. We were still making people better, and so if you've got a single focus mission, and it might be getting these battle casualties back to the highest level of function you can, and you know what you're doing, and you've got the resources to do it, then the morale is high. When you haven't got the resources to do things, and you know what you could do if you had them, and then morale is low. Having said that, it takes a lot of effort to keep morale up, and I sort of used to have people in my office literally almost every day crying about the stress they were in. But I think having a focus, having a vision of what we're trying to do, and having, supported management is the key. And I always felt as a leader of that organization, my job was to act as an umbrella. It was to keep all the crap off the people who were doing the proper work, who went into work at 8 o'clock in the morning and left at 5, and all they were doing is seeing patients. And they were really good at it, and they were getting people better. And what they don't want to know is, oh, I'm not sure they're doing it properly, or you haven't got enough equipment, or News of the World says that, we're not very good, or, all that sort of stuff. They don't want that. They don't need that. They need to be able to do their job or play the game without those additional pressures. And there's another role of a leader, I think, is to act as that umbrella and keep that stress off people.
Yeah. How is that for you, though?
You have to take that stress.
Yeah, I was going to say, so how is that for you? Because that is significant, isn't it? Because again, there's a lot that you're dealing with there.
Well, I think you just have to have mechanisms by which you offload that stress, and realize that actually most of the time it doesn't matter. If the Secretary of State for Health doesn't like you very much, he'll get over it and I'll get over it. Or if your second line manager doesn't like you very much because he thinks you're making too much of a situation. Doesn't matter. What's the mission? Is the mission to be liked, or is the mission to get young men and women on prosthetic limbs? It wasn't really much of a question. So some of the stress dissipates, and I think there's most of my formal learning on management training comes from The Godfather Part 1, and one of the messages there is it's business, it's not personal. And when you take these things personally, then it is horrible. But if you say, well, okay, doesn't matter, that's not It's not what we're here for. I'm just trying to get prosthetic limbs onto young men. Have we done that? Yes. Well, we've succeeded. So, and I think, like most of us, actually, where we get our refreshment from and support from is our family and friends. And if your family and friends are still there and they're getting on with their life and they're supportive, then it doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah, no, I think it's really, really good advice, and it's one I need to take sometimes as well. Is that when you can take things personally, and ultimately, whatever you're thinking probably isn't the reality anyway. That's your perception of that particular environment. And have you seen that change at all in your time working? Because like since moving out of the military, is that do you see a change in that?
What, in attitudes or in
Just
people's?
yeah, because again, there's always talk about mental health and the way people dealing with stress, anxiety.
I think the good thing about nowadays is people talk about it, and I suspect there's no increase in perceptible mental health problems. I think we're just better at reflecting that. You know, when I was a battalion medical officer in Northern Ireland, I treated three types of condition. The one was um, musculoskeletal injuries, and at that stage, I had very little training, experience, and knowledge of what to do with it. Um, the psychological health of the troops was a big part of it, and I spent a lot of time talking to young soldiers about their concerns and worries and anxieties. And bear in mind, young infantry soldiers are in that 18, 19. They often come from poor socioeconomic backgrounds with poor family support. That's probably why they've joined the army. So you do spend a lot of time talking to them about these issues and getting them, counselling them, and getting them to understand they're not alone in that. So that's in the 80s and 90s. And the third thing I used to treat a lot of was sexually acquired infections. So, it wasn't a very broad type of medicine, but the psychological health thing was a big thing then. But I think now we're much better at saying, hold on a minute, I'm mentally struggling here. And we should treat that mental struggle as we would treat a broken leg, without stigma or qualms. It's just part of being alive. It's part of, mental health is an integral part of all the other parts of health, physical health. So I'm what I'm what I feel very strongly about is that there's a very broad message saying, oh, younger generation, they're not up to it, you're not like we were, and one or something. There's nonsense. The younger generation is a much more interesting, much more informed, much more energetic and exciting group of people than my generation. And they've got their demons and their problems. Perhaps they talk about it more. That's good.
Yeah, no, it's good to hear your perspective on that one. And then, so in terms of that, I know we've talked a lot about the military, and it's like there's obviously a massive part of what you were doing. So, at what point did you start to look elsewhere, or look at the take the role that you're in now?
Well, I was looking for a few years before I left, as you do, because you're coming up to a point where you're pensionable and you got more options to move and things like that. But when they decided to close Headley and move it up to Loughborough, I thought, well, I'd spent a long time, 15 years or more, developing structures in Headley, and I just didn't fancy the idea of going somewhere else and doing it all again from scratch. So I thought that's a good time to leave. So I left at a time when Headley Court closed and I moved up to Loughborough. And then I so that was in 2019. I left, yeah, 2019. and did a few consultancy jobs for about 6 months, and then got a job working as the medical director for Pure Sports Medicine in September 2019. Whereupon in March 2020 we had COVID. So yeah, so I've worked at Pure for 4 years and really enjoyed it.
And what was it that particularly attracted you to working there?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing was it was a very similar model to what was left in the military. It was very focused on multidisciplinary team working. It had a combination of doctors and physios, osteopaths, podiatry, strength and conditioning, and that model looked very similar to what was designed and worked with in the armed forces. And I was very keen that if I was going to go off and do clinical medicine again, that I worked in that environment. So Pure was the epitome of what I wanted to do, and it's an unusual, it's unique, I think, private medical provider in the sense that that MDT environment is really, really encouraged. And having worked there, it was the environment, indeed the patients were very similar to what I'd been used to in the military. They were young, they were athletic, not exclusively, but there is a young city sort of vibe to it. They're often very keen on their activity, and they present with very similar musculoskeletal injuries. But also, as it's come to pass in my clinic, I'm seeing the same sort of presentations, but with inflammatory arthritis as well. So most of my clinic is inflammatory arthritis now, it's in a young population in their 20s and 30s, with a similar sort of background to the military patients I used to see with arthritis. So my practice has hardly changed at all. I'm seeing youngish people with inflammatory joint disease or musculoskeletal injuries, and interesting, a lot of them have quite a significant psychological burden as well, because they work in stressful environments and they're young, and they work long hours, and often physical activity is their outlet for stress. And if you don't have that outlet, their stress levels go up. So much of my consultations are still about musculoskeletal injuries and psychological distress. I see much less sexually acquired infection now, which is a boon, but very similar pattern. And the people we're working with at Pure, the physios and the other allied health professions, are great, fun people to work with, young, enthusiastic, want to get better, want to learn more, want to deliver a good multidisciplinary team working, enjoy learning. What's not to like? Great place.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple of your colleagues on, and even the ones that have left speak really highly about the organisation. And so, how do you do that? Like, how do you keep that energy? When you're recruiting, it's interviews, it's challenging to find the right person from just an interview. So, how do you do that?
Well, I think it's about having a set of values, and those values are very much instilled by the senior management team who believe in them, and in particular Claire Small, who was a founder of the company and has been huge driver, and a lot of energy behind what those values mean about good clinical care and continued education and support to each other and all that sort of thing. So it's knowing what the company believes in. It's having that vision and mission, a bit like Headley Court. We know what we are, we know what we want to do, and we want to do the very best we can in it. And then the guys like Sam Wild and Adam Good, who are going out there and recruiting people and interviewing them and finding people who want to be part of a similar organisation. And likewise, myself trying to find doctors who equally want to be team players and want to be part of an organisation where they can share and discuss and teach and learn. And it's not always easy. And COVID made things a bit more complicated, obviously. But I think we got a great crowd, and people will join pure. They know what they're getting. They're not going to be working away in the office on their own. They're going to be working with a team, and if you like teams, you're going to like working there.
Yeah, no, we were talking before because obviously, we've supported you with technology and things like that. But I liked your philosophy and analogy around the where tech plays, but ultimately it comes back to the people that you in your organization.
It does, and I also have the belief that an organization is it's like a rugby team or football team. It's not just about a star or these stars. It is a team. You need a group of people, and often teams with the right ethos, the right values, the right level of commitment, that sort of interpersonal commitment to each other are the ones that win, not the ones with the two great stars at the front. You don't need stars to have a really, really effective team. In fact, quite often it doesn't work so well. What you need is people who believe the same stuff and want to achieve the same aims, and then have good leadership that says, okay. And this is I think one of the hardest things about leadership is that you say, what do you want? Say to your team, what do you want to do? And the team say, I think we should do X. And you go, well, there's a risk attached with X, but I think you've got the enthusiasm and drive to do X. Off you go. And if you make a mistake or it's a disaster, don't worry about it. It's my fault. You've come to me with X. I think X is a good idea. There's risks, but in order for you to do that job properly, in order for you to get your effect maximized, you can't go out there worrying about it. So you go out and do your very best. You've told me about it. I'm invested in it. It's now my responsibility. So you go and off and do it. And if it works, it's great. And if it doesn't work, it's your fault. And a lot of people don't want to do that. A lot of people feel uncomfortable doing that. And it is uncomfortable, but if you get used to it, then what happens is it frees up your team to be innovative, to take risks, to be safe, but to take new innovations and make something better. And as a leader, you've got to say, that's my responsibility. Try and get it right.
Yeah, comes back to the umbrella analogy, I guess, doesn't it, in terms of protecting people.
My best bosses have said to me, I've said to them, I've got an idea to do X, and they go, okay, let me know if it goes right. And sometimes they don't think you're going to do it, and sometimes they're right. But unless you have a go, you're never going to do it. And if you look at markers of satisfaction at work, one of the biggest indicators of happiness at work is this sense of autonomy. So if you go to work and you're told you need to do A, B, C, and don't do D and don't do E, just do A, B, C, and if you get it wrong, I'm going to come down on you like a ton of bricks, people are unhappy. If you're saying, okay, this is your arc of responsibility, and I want this output, I don't care how you get that output, provided it's legal and safe and effective, but you give me the output, and the rest of it is up to you. Then you get much happier and more effective and productive workers. And it's a bit like the military concepts of mission command. Mission command says basically, on an infantry level, I'm the company commander. I have 150 men under my command. I have to take this hill. Section commander's got 10 people in under his command. I'm not going to tell you how to take your section of the hill. You just need to take that. We need to get to the top of the hill. And because you're on the ground, you can see what's happening and you can find the solution to that problem. I'm just telling you what the mission is. And that way there's flexibility and people are allowed to interact in an individual way to achieve the same aim. We all have the same goal. And that mission command thing is important in many branches of business or medicine. You say, look, this is the aim. This is what we're trying to do. How you get to the aim is not important. That gives them flexibility. It also allows them the belief that if it goes wrong, they're not going to get blamed. They've tried their best. And they feel autonomous. They feel happier in their work. It fails, they'll try again next time. So I think that you've got to have an environment where people feel a degree of autonomy and they feel that they have the control to do things and experiment and try and get better. And that way you learn. If you're constrained, you never do.
Yeah, no, fully agree. And not to bring it back onto you, because I know we just talked about not being the star, but how did you, when you heard about getting the CBE, what was that experience like?
It was very nice. It was very nice. I think that the thing that's nice in those situations, frankly, is that you can take your family and your family goes there and you get some pictures of your family and we have a nice day out and you go for a nice lunch, expensive lunch, and the outfits cost a fortune. And but it's a nice reward to the family, really. That's how I see it. When I look at the photographs, I look at it and think, oh, they look good. It's really nice. I'm really pleased. I'm nice to have a day out and get a gong around your neck, but really it's sort of an indirect way of saying thank you to the family, really, for putting up with miserable Yorkshire regretful Leeds United supporter for so many years, really.
That wasn't the official reason you got it, was it?
Well, being the last remaining Leeds United supporter from the 70s, yeah, probably. Yeah. It's probably as good as any reason. But yeah, no, I mean, and clearly very supported by my wife and family over the years. So that's the main thing, really.
And then just a couple more questions. Congratulations on that. It is an amazing achievement, which I know you're underplaying, but it's, yeah, I appreciate that anyway. In terms of what are the plans now then for you and for pure sports medicine? Where are you looking to take it?
Yeah, well, I'm obviously still medical director in pure sports medicine, and our views are that we like doing what we're doing at the moment, and we want to expand it, and we're looking at various new opportunities going into the future. We've just bought a new clinic at the Roehampton Club, and we're in the process of developing that, and that will have our usual model of care and our usual branding, and we'll have doctors there as well as physiotherapists and strength and conditioning and all our usual modalities of care. So that's the latest in our sort of bid to expand. But we're looking for further opportunities in the future, and I'm really excited about it because I think we've got an excellent team. Not just the clinicians, but the senior management team who it's been a pleasure to work for, because they are that group which allows me that autonomy to do the things that I want to do. Even in the challenges of COVID, it's been a very straightforward organisation to work for. We've got a problem, we know the solution, let's action that solution. I don't have to spend 6 months writing a business case for it. we will do it. And that's because of the quality of the people in the senior management team and the values and visions we have. And we're really keen to try and expand that into other clinics, hopefully, ultimately around the country.
Yeah, no, sounds great. And then, so for people, when you're obviously going to need people to be in these facilities and moving forward, so what would your advice be for people that are wanting to get into the area or wanting to come and work at an institution like Pure Sports Medicine?
Well, it's simple. Give us a call and drop us an email and a line, and we would be delighted to meet people like that. We are a very straightforward organisation. We do believe, and we do try and live by the values that we set, and we love multidisciplinary working because it's not just good for the patient, it's fun to do it. So if that's the sort of person you are, come and join it. Now, I say this without any sort of hyperbole at all. It's one of the happiest places I've ever worked. Everywhere you go, people smile, say hello, welcome you, and we all have the same ethos. So it's a great place to work, and I would definitely recommend it.
Brilliant. No, great. Well, yeah, having been to them before, I can definitely testify to it. They look great environments, and all the team that I've met there have been really good to work with, from my perspective. So yeah, I'm looking forward to supporting you with anything that is required, and whether it's education or whatever. So yeah, thank you for your time today, and well done with everything you've achieved so far.
Thank you. Thanks for chatting.
No problem. Cheers, John. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.